I found a used lube tube in my husband's glove box, next to our steakhouse receipt. Then I opened his email and read, "You were incredible tonight, Dad." I screenshotted it with my hands shaking so bad I almost dropped my phone. The receipt said dinner for two, and his work meeting story didn't match. And the name I was about to connect to all of it was my son's wife. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I got quiet, and I got organized. I keep receipts. 2 weeks earlier, I still thought I had a normal life. You know that hot, sick feeling that crawls up your chest when something's wrong? That's where I was. Like my body knew before my brain caught up. And if you're thinking, no way, that can't be what it looks like. Yeah, I told myself the same thing for about 30 seconds. Big mistake. Because I'm going to tell you right now, I didn't get played by strangers. I got played by my own family. Here's the part that'll make you feel better later. I didn't beg. I didn't plead. I didn't do the whole sad wife speech. I built a ladder of proof so solid they couldn't wiggle out, and when it was time, I made sure the fall was loud. So let me back up to the night it started cracking. It was a Tuesday, late, and my bakery had already chewed me up and spit me out. I'd been on my feet since before sunrise, because that's what you do when people count on you for payroll and pastries and the kind of comfort food they treat themselves to after a bad day. I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee, staring at the little digital clock on the stove like it had personally offended me. The house was too quiet. Even the fridge sounded loud. My husband had texted earlier, something casual like, "Running late, business dinner." And we've been married a long time. Long enough that you learn the difference between running late and running away. Around 11:40 p.m., I heard the garage door rattle up, then his SUV door slam. He came in like he wanted to be invisible, shoes off quick, keys tossed in the bowl, not a lot of eye contact, and he smelled wrong. Not cigarettes, not booze, floral, sweet. Like the perfume counter at Macy's had moved into my kitchen. I looked up and said, real calm, "Hey, everything okay?" He didn't even pause. He dropped a kiss on my forehead, like he was checking a box, and said, Yeah, long night. You didn't have to wait up." He went straight to the bedroom, and I listened to the springs dip as he sat on the edge of the bed. No shower. No, "How was your day?" Nothing. That's when my brain started doing math. Because he's been tired before. We all have. But tired doesn't come with a stranger's perfume. Tired doesn't come with this stiff, rehearsed tone like he'd practiced it in the car. I stayed at the table for another minute, pretending I was still scrolling on my phone. I could hear the TV click on low in the bedroom, like he wanted background noise. Like noise makes lies feel safer. Then I stood up, walked down the hall, and pushed the bedroom door open just enough to see him. He was sprawled on top of the covers, fully dressed, phone face down on his chest like a little shield. And I'm not proud of what I did next, but I'm also not sorry. He rolled onto his side. The phone slid onto the bed. And for a second, the screen lit up from a notification. Email. He doesn't use email. That's been his whole routine for years. Just text me. I don't check that stuff. Too much spam. That's what he says. So why was his email lighting up at midnight? I stood there in the dark, watching him breathe, like nothing in the world could touch him, while my stomach went tight and hard. Some people say you should never look. I say, if they're lying, you already don't have the marriage you think you do. I picked up his phone and went into the bathroom, because I didn't want the screen glow reflecting off the walls and giving me away. I shut the door, locked it, and turned on the fan, like that little whirring sound could cover the fact that my whole life was about to change. The email was right there at the top. Short, fresh, no thread. And the first line was a slap. "You were incredible tonight, Dad." There was a little heart emoji after it, like it was cute, like it was sweet. My mouth went dry. My hand started tingling. I stared at that word dad like it had teeth. Who calls my husband Dad in a romantic email? I screenshotted it so fast, my finger slipped the first time. Wrong move, sweetheart. I went into his sent folder. Nothing. Trash folder. Empty. His messages were weirdly clean, too, like somebody had taken a broom to the whole phone. That clean phone look? It's not nothing to hide. It's, I'm hiding everything. I put the phone back exactly where it had been, turned off the bathroom light, and walked out like a ghost. I slid under my side of the covers and stared at the ceiling while he snored like a man who thought he was untouchable. He wasn't. In the morning, he acted normal. Too normal. He poured himself coffee, kissed my cheek, and said, "Busy day. I'll probably be late again." I watched him like I'd never met him. Same face, same voice, different man. He left, and I stood at my kitchen sink with my hands in soapy water. I wasn't even scrubbing, just thinking, okay, if I'm wrong, I'll feel stupid. If I'm right, I'm about to get my heart ripped out. But I wasn't going to let him make me look stupid twice. I went to the garage first. His SUV was parked in the same spot, angled a little sloppy like he'd rushed in. The passenger seat had a faint dent, like someone had been sitting there for a while. I climbed in and shut the door behind me, and the inside still held that sweet perfume smell. Faint, but stubborn. I opened the center console. Mostly junk. Mints, old receipts, a charging cable. Then I opened the glove box, and there it was. A tube of lubricant. Used. Not sealed. The cap was on crooked. There was residue around the opening like it had been squeezed in a hurry. My skin went hot. My throat tightened. We haven't used anything like that. Not in years. Not in my house. Not in my marriage. I took a picture of it right there in the glove box, my phone flashlight glaring off the plastic. Then I took another, closer. Because if somebody tries to gaslight you, you don't want one blurry photo. You want proof so clear it makes them sweat. I got out, closed the glove box, and sat on the garage floor for a second, with my back against the cold wall. That's when the anger showed up. Not loud anger, cold anger. The kind that makes you think in steps. I'm not the one who's going to be embarrassed. I washed my hands 3 times, scrubbed until my knuckles stung. Then I went back out and did a deeper search, like I was training a new employee and checking their work. Under the back seat, I found a couple napkins folded up, the kind you get at an upscale place, not fast food napkins, real cloth feel paper. And they smelled like her too, whoever her was. I photographed those, too. Receipts don't lie. Then I went inside and found his jacket tossed over a chair. I checked the pockets. That's where I found the paper receipt, folded in half like it didn't matter. Steakhouse, the nice one. The kind we'd go to for an anniversary if he actually cared. Dinner for 2. And here's the thing that made my eyes narrow. The location didn't match what he told me. He'd said he was meeting clients closer to downtown. This receipt was from a spot out in the suburbs, tucked by a shopping center, with a Target and a Whole Foods. He hadn't been with clients. He'd been on a date. I took a picture of that receipt on my kitchen counter, with my thumb in the frame so nobody could later say I pulled it off the internet. Then I zoomed in on the timestamp, 9:18 p.m. Right around when he texted me, "Still at dinner." I sat down at the table again, because my legs were suddenly weak, and I stared at my phone screen full of photos. The lubricant, the receipt, the email screenshot, 3 separate pieces. Same story. And at that moment, I had a choice. I could confront him and watch him lie to my face. Or I could stay quiet, stack-proof, and take away his ability to spin it. Silence became my weapon. I decided I was going to find out who the email was from. Because Dad wasn't a random pet name. Not in my world. That word has a whole meaning attached to it, and the only dad situation in my life was my son. My son, who adores his father, who still calls him for advice, who thinks he hung the moon. My son's wife, on the other hand, had been acting a little too comfortable lately, always laughing at my husband's jokes, always touching his arm when she talked, always volunteering to help when we had family dinners, like she wanted to be the center of attention. I remember thinking once, months ago, she's a little flirty, isn't she? And then I brushed it off, because who even thinks like that about their own family? Well, I do now. I made myself go to the bakery anyway, because life doesn't pause for betrayal. My staff still needed schedules. The ovens still needed to be on. People were still going to come in asking for cinnamon rolls, like nothing in the world was falling apart. I drove there in my own car, hands tight on the steering wheel, and the whole time my brain kept replaying those words. Incredible tonight. Dad. It was disgusting. It was brazen. And honestly, it was cocky. Like they thought I'd never find out. Like I was just some older wife who'd keep baking and smiling while they played house behind my back. They had me confused. At the bakery, I pretended I was fine. I smiled at customers. I rang up a mom buying cupcakes for her kids' classroom. I nodded while my manager told me we were low on flour. Meanwhile, in my office, I started building a file. Old school. Because phones get lost, accounts get hacked. But paper? Paper sits right where you put it. I printed the email screenshot. I printed the receipt photo. I wrote the date and time in the corner with a pen, like I was documenting a crime. Because in my heart, that's what it felt like. Then I sat there and stared at the empty space where who should be. And I realized something else. If he was bold enough to leave a used tube in his glove box, he'd been doing this long enough to get sloppy, which meant there would be other proof somewhere. I checked our shared bank account on my phone just to see if anything weird popped. Nothing obvious yet. No giant transfers, no mystery withdrawals. But there were a couple charges I didn't recognize right away. Small stuff. Parking, coffee, a mid-range boutique I'd never set foot in. I screenshotted those too, just in case. You don't get to rewrite the story later. By lunchtime, I was exhausted and wired at the same time. Like I'd chugged too much coffee and then somebody punched me in the gut. And here's the controversial part. I decided I wasn't going to do this alone. I'm a private person. I don't like involving outsiders. I don't like telling people my business. But I also wasn't going to play detective against two liars who'd clearly been practicing. So I called my friend Linda. She's one of those women who always knows somebody who knows somebody. The kind of friend you call when you need a plumber, an attorney, or a miracle. She answered on the second ring. Hey, you okay? I said, no. And I need you to listen without interrupting. There was a pause. Then her voice got serious. Okay, talk. I told her about the perfume, the email, the receipt, the glove box. She didn't gasp. She didn't do the fake sympathy thing. She just said, very flat, oh my God, end quote. Then she said, do you want me to tell you what I think? Or do you want me to lie? I said, tell me. She said, you need proof that holds up when they deny it, and they're going to deny it. That's when she gave me a number for a private investigator she'd used once when her sister's ex was hiding money during a divorce. A private investigator. Yeah, that's how fast I moved. What do you think? Would you have hired someone that quick? Or would you confront first? Comment below. Because here's where people love to judge. They'll say, you should have talked to him. They'll say, that's your husband. They'll say, maybe it's a misunderstanding. And I'm telling you right now, if your husband is getting an email like that, it's not a misunderstanding. It's a choice. I texted the investigator. I kept it simple. Need to confirm infidelity, discreet Dallas area. He wrote back 5 minutes later, can meet today, 2 p.m. downtown cafe. End quote. My stomach flipped at how real it suddenly felt. Like this wasn't me being paranoid. This was me starting a case. I told my assistant I had to run an errand and left the bakery. I drove down to a cafe near downtown Dallas, the kind with exposed brick and overpriced iced coffee, and people typing on laptops like they're running the world. I picked a corner table where I could see the door. He walked in right on time. Mid 40 seconds, maybe. Solid build. Plain clothes. Not a trench coat, thank God. He looked like a guy you'd pass in the grocery store and never remember. He sat down, gave me a small nod, and said, "You're the one who texted." I said, "Yeah." He didn't push me to talk. He just waited. So I pulled out my phone and slid it across the table with the screenshots open. The email first, then the receipt, then the glove box photo. He looked at the screen, and his face didn't change much, but his eyes sharpened. He said, "That dad thing that's a red flag." "If you an ass?" I let out this humorless little laugh. "You think?" He said, "You want to know who it is?" I said, "I want to know everything, and I want it documented." He asked for my husband's basic info: vehicle description, usual schedule, workplace, and he kept it all business. No pity, no gawking. I liked that. He said, "If he's seeing someone, he has patterns. We'll find them." I asked, "How fast can you start?" He said, "Today?" That answer hit me like a switch flip. Because once you do that, once you pay someone to follow your spouse, you can't pretend you're in a normal marriage anymore. That was it for me. I transferred him a deposit right there. Not cash, because I'm not stupid. I did it through a legit invoice he emailed me. And yes, I saved that too. Then I handed him a little flash drive I'd loaded with the photos and the printed copies in an envelope. He tucked it away like it was just another job, stood up, and said, "I'll update you when I have something." He walked out, and I sat there staring at my coffee, untouched. For a second, I almost felt guilty, like I was betraying him by investigating. Then I remembered the used tube in the glove box. Nope. I drove back to the bakery and forced myself through the rest of the day. Smiled, talked inventory, reviewed next week's catering order. Went over payroll like I wasn't holding a grenade under the desk. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart kicked. By closing time, I was so wound tight my shoulders hurt. I went home, and my husband wasn't there yet. Of course he wasn't. I cooked something simple I didn't even taste. I cleaned the kitchen like I was trying to scrub the betrayal out of the grout. Then he came in around 9:30, acting tired again, acting casual. He leaned against the counter and said, "Long day." "You good?" I looked him straight in the face and said, "I'm fine." The lie tasted weird in my mouth, but it also felt powerful. He didn't deserve my truth. He told me some story about a client meeting and paperwork, and I nodded at the right moments like a trained audience. And I watched him, really watched him. He kept checking his phone. Not big obvious swipes, but little glances. Like he was waiting for a message. Then his phone buzzed on the counter, and he grabbed it so fast it was almost funny. Almost. He turned his body slightly away from me while he read, and I caught just a glimpse of the screen before it went dark again. A name. A woman's name. And the way his face softened for half a second told me everything I needed. I didn't say a word. I went to bed early because I needed him to think I was predictable. I needed him to keep getting comfortable. Lying people get sloppy when they think they're safe. Around midnight, I heard him come into the bedroom and slide into bed. He smelled like mint gum and cologne, like he'd tried to erase the day off his skin. He fell asleep fast. I laid there, staring into the dark, listening to his breathing, and I hated how normal it sounded. The next morning, I got up before him. I made coffee. I fed the dog. I checked my phone and saw nothing from the investigator yet. I went into the bakery, and the second I walked in, the flower smell hit me, warm and familiar, like my old life was trying to comfort me. It didn't work. All morning, I jumped every time the bell above the bakery door rang, every time a customer laughed, every time my phone vibrated. By noon, my nerves were so shot I had to sit down in my office and take slow breaths like I was trying not to pass out. Then my phone finally buzzed. Unknown number, but I knew. I locked my office door because I didn't want anyone seeing my face when I read whatever was coming. The message was short. Got eyes on him, sending first photo in a minute. She picked the wrong one. I stared at that text with my thumb hovering, and I swear the whole room went silent. Because the next thing I was about to see was either going to save my marriage or burn my whole family to the ground. And you and I both know which one it was. My phone lit up with the first photo, and that was the moment denial died. And you know that feeling when your stomach turns before your brain catches up? Yeah, she picked the wrong one. The private investigator didn't send it with some big dramatic caption, just a plain text, photo 1. I tapped it, and there my husband was, clear as day, standing outside an upscale restaurant in Dallas like he owned the sidewalk. He had his hand on a woman's lower back, guiding her toward the door the way a man does when he's trying to look protective and proud. And the woman wasn't some stranger. It was my daughter-in-law. Same hair, same posture, same little purse she brings to family dinners. I could have picked her out in a crowd from across a Target parking lot. The photo was taken from across the street, probably from a car, and it was still sharp enough to make my skin crawl. So yeah, I sat there in my bakery office, door locked, and stared at my own life like it was a crime scene. I didn't cry. I didn't call anybody. I saved it. I made a new folder on my laptop when I got home that night. Date, time, location. I named it like I was building a case, because I was. Proof changes everything. The investigator texted again. More coming. I put my phone face down on the desk for 2 seconds. Like that could slow my pulse. Then I flipped it back over. Because who was I kidding? I wanted it all. Every ugly detail. And here's the part that still makes my teeth clench. In that same moment, out on my sales floor, customers were laughing over coffee and cinnamon rolls like the world was normal. My employees were wrapping boxes with string, talking about weekend plans. Meanwhile, I had a photo of my husband on a date with my son's wife. Tell me that doesn't make you want to flip a table. I opened the photo again and zoomed in because I needed my brain to stop trying to soften it. I saw his wedding ring. I saw her hand touching his forearm. I saw the way his face angled toward hers like he couldn't stand being an inch away. That tenderness wasn't for me. I printed the photo at the bakery printer because I didn't trust just digital. I slid it into a manila envelope with the rest of my little collection, and I wrote the date across the top like I was filing taxes. Then my phone buzzed again. This time it was a short video. He'd caught them inside the restaurant through the window because some places have those big glass panels facing the street. The clip was maybe 10 seconds, but it was enough. Candlelight, both of them leaning in. The kind of laughing that's private, like they're sharing something nobody else gets. And my husband raised his glass to her, a toast, like he was celebrating. I watched it 3 times because my brain kept trying to say, maybe they were meeting to plan something. Maybe it's a surprise. Maybe I'm misunderstanding. And then he reached across the table and brushed her cheek with his thumb. That's not business. That's not family. That's cheating with a side of cruelty. Look, I'm not naive. I know affairs happen. I've heard the stories. I've watched friends rebuild after being betrayed. But this was the kind of betrayal that messes with your sense of reality, because it wasn't just my marriage. It was my whole family structure. Holidays, birthdays, Sunday dinners, all of it poisoned. And if you're sitting there thinking, I'd never survive that, I'm going to tell you something that surprised me too. Anger is a fuel. It kept me standing. I walked out of my office, put on my bakery owner face, and handled the rest of my day like I was a woman with nothing but frosting on her mind. Smiled at customers, checked inventory, signed a delivery slip. I even helped box up a catering order for an office party. My hands didn't shake until I was alone again. Back in my office, I texted the investigator. Is that definitely her? He replied, yes, confirmed. Same vehicle I saw at her address earlier. Her address? So he'd done his homework. He wasn't guessing. He'd followed her day 2. That's when the humiliation really hit. Not because of the affair itself, because of the sheer audacity. These two weren't sneaking around with strangers. They were operating inside the same little circle I built my life around. They weren't just lying. They were counting on me to stay polite. I sat there and thought about the last family barbecue we'd had. How my daughter-in-law barely looked at my husband when I walked into the room. How she'd suddenly gotten busy and slipped into the kitchen the second he walked in, like she didn't want to be caught standing too close. At the time, I thought she was being respectful. Now I knew it was choreography. They weren't awkward. They were strategic. I grabbed my calendar and started replaying the past few months like a highlight reel of red flags. The girls' shopping trips she'd insisted on, where she'd conveniently left early. The times my husband ran errands right after she said she had to stop somewhere too. The way they never sat next to each other at my table, always with someone wedged between them. They weren't trying to be decent. They were hiding in plain sight. And that's when I made my first real move in the social arena. Not screaming, not exposing, just shifting the air around her so she'd start feeling the pressure. Because once you know, you start seeing everything. That evening, my son texted me a simple, "Hey mom, you doing okay?" And for half a second, I stared at that message like it was a trap. Because my son is a good man. He's steady. He's loyal. He loves his dad. He loves his wife. He still thinks we're all one big happy unit. If I crack this open too early, without proof that could hold up under denial, I'd lose him before I could save him. So I wrote back, "Just tired. Busy week." And then I sat there holding my phone, thinking, "I'm sorry, baby. I'm about to wreck your world. But I'm not going to let you stay in the dark while they play you too." Because yeah, he was getting played. You don't cheat with your son's wife without lying to your son every single day. My phone buzzed again around 8:15 p.m. Another photo. This one was outside the restaurant. My husband was opening her car door for her like a gentleman, like she was precious, like she was his responsibility. The investigator caught the moment right when she leaned into him, and his hand slid down her back. Then the next photo came in. A kiss. Not a peck, not a polite cheek thing. A full-on kiss in the parking lot, right there under a bright light like they didn't care who saw. They were bold, and bold people get sloppy. I saved everything twice, phone and laptop. Then I emailed the files to myself from a separate account because I've lived long enough to know electronics fail at the worst time. Receipts need backups. That night, my husband came home later than usual. He walked in whistling, if you can believe it. Whistling, like he just had the best day of his life. He dropped his keys in the bowl, leaned in for a kiss, and I turned my head so it landed on my cheek. I didn't even fake it. He paused, just a hair, then tried to smooth it over. "You okay?" I shrugged. Long day. He nodded like he understood, then launched into some story about client dinners and networking. He was so comfortable lying that he didn't even sound nervous. That's when I realized something else. He wasn't just cheating. He was enjoying it. And that flipped a switch in me. Because if you're going to enjoy humiliating me, then you're going to enjoy the consequences too. I went to bed early again and let him think I was predictable. In the dark, I listened to him tap on his phone for a few minutes before the tapping stopped. He was messaging her. I could feel it in my bones. The next morning, I got another update from the investigator while I was standing in line at Starbucks near the bakery, trying to look like a normal woman ordering coffee. "Hotel next," the message said. My fingers tightened around the paper cup. The barista called my name, and I forced a smile like nothing was happening. And you know what's wild? That's when the vindication hit. Not joy, not relief, vindication. Because the minute he said hotel, I thought about that steakhouse receipt from part 1. The timing, the distance, the way my husband came home smelling like perfume and mint, like he'd been scrubbing evidence off his mouth. This wasn't some emotional affair or flirty texts. They were doing it. They were crossing every line. So I texted back one word, document. He replied, always. That afternoon dragged. Every hour felt like it took two. I stayed busy on purpose, because if I stopped moving, I'd start shaking. I directed a delivery. I corrected an order. I dealt with a customer who wanted a refund because her cake wasn't sweet enough. Like I was supposed to fix her taste buds. And the whole time, in the back of my mind, I kept picturing my son's face if he knew. The betrayal wasn't just mine. It was his. Around 6:30 p.m., the investigator sent the next set of photos. Hotel exterior, nice one. Not some cheap roadside place. The kind of hotel with valet parking and clean landscaping and people carrying little rolling suitcases like they're important. And there was my husband, stepping out of his SUV like he belonged there. Then another photo. My daughter-in-law walking up from the sidewalk, hair done, outfit sharp, like she'd been getting ready all day for this. Then the one that made my vision go narrow. They met up right outside the entrance, and he pulled her close like he'd been waiting. His hand went to her waist. She laughed and leaned her head against his shoulder, like this was romance. Like my marriage and my son's life were just background noise. I saved the photos, then I zoomed in on the hotel sign and the timestamp in the corner. The investigator's camera logged it all. Date, time, location, hard proof. That's what I needed. He followed up with another message. Going inside, I sat in my car in the bakery parking lot for a minute after that, just gripping the steering wheel. Because now the story wasn't hypothetical. It was playing out in real time, and I couldn't stop it. But I could record it, and I could plan. Here's the thing about being a woman my age. People underestimate you. They think you're going to crumble. They think you're going to beg for peace. I don't beg. I build. That night, I did something I didn't expect to do. I invited them over. Not for a big meal. Not for a celebration. Just a casual, hey, I made too much chili. Swing by if you want some. The text went to my son first, because I wasn't going to be alone with her. I'm not stupid. But I wanted to see how fast the situation shifted when I was suddenly warm again. My son replied, "Sure, we can come by." Then, a few minutes later, my daughter-in-law texted me separately. "That sounds great. Can I bring cornbread?" Cornbread. Like we were normal. The audacity is almost impressive. When they showed up, my husband was already home, sitting on the couch, acting like his day had been so exhausting. My son walked in smiling, kissed my cheek, and went straight to talking sports with his dad, like everything was fine. And my daughter-in-law hugged me. Full hug. Tight. Too tight. She pulled back and said, "You look tired. Are you taking care of yourself?" And I just looked at her and said, "I am now." Her smile flickered for half a second, just a tiny break in the mask. Then she recovered and laughed. "Good. You deserve it." End quote. If you've ever watched someone lie straight to your face, you know the look. They get a little shiny around the eyes. They overdo the sweetness. They talk faster. She was performing. My husband kept his distance from her all evening. Stayed on the opposite side of the room. Let my son sit between them at the table. Didn't glance her way unless he thought I wasn't watching, which meant they were careful. And careful means guilty. After they left, I cleaned up the kitchen and found myself standing there, staring at the empty chairs like they'd been ghosts. Because in a way, that's what they were. The people I thought I knew were gone, replaced by two-faced strangers wearing familiar faces. The investigator's next message came in at 11:17 p.m. Balcony video. I didn't even breathe. I sat down at the kitchen table, opened the file, and watched. The camera angle was from a distance, probably from a neighboring building or a parked car with a long lens. It showed a hotel balcony, lights dim, and there they were, silhouettes at first, then clearer as they stepped into the glow. My husband wrapped his arms around her from behind. She leaned back into him like she'd done it 1,000 times. Then she turned, and he kissed her again, slow and familiar. Not a mistake, a habit. I watched it once, then again, because I wanted my brain to lock it in. No room for denial. No room for him to claim we just talked. Talked. My ass. I closed the video and stared at my reflection in my dark phone screen. My face looked calm, but my eyes looked like somebody else's. Sharper, harder. That's what betrayal does. It changes your posture. I forwarded the video to my own private email account, printed a still frame, and wrote the hotel name beneath it. Then I put it in the envelope with the rest. If you're wondering whether I felt guilty, I didn't. They were the ones sneaking around. I was just documenting reality. The next morning, I got the final update that turned affair into worse than I thought. The investigator texted, "They stayed overnight. She left at 7:06 a.m. He left at 7:42. 2 separate departure times. No quick oops. No, just dropping her off. They spent the night together." And the way my brain reacted wasn't sadness anymore. It was calculation. Because an overnight stay isn't just cheating. It's planning. It's comfort. It's a relationship with momentum. That means they weren't going to stop. And it means my son was walking around, smiling at 2 people who were betraying him behind his back. I sat there in my bakery office, phone in one hand, pen in the other, writing down those times like I was taking notes for court. Then I looked up at the framed family photo on my shelf, the one from last Christmas, where everyone's smiling in front of the tree. I saw it differently now. My husband's arm around me wasn't love. It was camouflage. My daughter-in-law's grin wasn't happiness. It was confidence. And my son, my sweet boy, he was the only one in that picture who didn't know he was standing next to a fire. Some people would have exploded right then. They would have called everybody, thrown the evidence in their faces, burned it all down in a day. I didn't, because I wasn't just trying to catch them. I was trying to crush the story they'd tell afterward. So I did the quietest, coldest thing I could think of. I called the investigator and said, "I need everything organized, dated, labeled. I want it clean." He said, "You got it." Then I opened my laptop and started a timeline. Restaurant, parking lot kiss, hotel entry, balcony video, overnight stay. And beside each one, I wrote what it meant. Not for me. For my son, because when I finally told him, I wanted him to have something solid to hold on to when his whole world started shaking. I took a deep breath, picked up my phone, and hovered over my son's contact. My thumb didn't press yet, not yet, but I was right there. And that's when my phone buzzed again. One more message from the investigator. "For your information." She looked around before meeting him. Like she's worried someone's watching. I stared at that line until my eyes burned. Because if she was worried, that meant something else too. She knew she was playing with fire, and she was starting to feel the heat. Done playing nice. I set my phone down, grabbed my keys, and locked up the bakery early. I drove home with my hand steady on the wheel, but my mind moving fast, because I had a new question now. If they're getting nervous, what are they going to do to protect themselves? When I pulled into my driveway, there was a car already parked, a couple houses down, engine running. Not one I recognized. Dark windows, sitting too long. I didn't get out right away. I just sat there, watching it, waiting to see if it moved. Because all of a sudden, I wasn't just collecting proof anymore. I was being watched. And you know what? That's when I realized it really was worse than I thought. That car down the street wasn't a coincidence. And if you've ever felt your gut say danger before, you had proof. Trust it. Wrong house to stalk. I stayed in my driveway with the engine off, watching those dark windows like they were going to blink. The street was quiet, normal Dallas suburb quiet. Sprinklers ticking. A dog barking 2 houses over. Somebody's TV muffled through a window. That car sat there anyway. Then the brake lights flashed once, slow and deliberate, and it rolled off like it had gotten what it came for. So yeah, now I wasn't just collecting proof. I was on their radar. The next morning I called my friend Linda before the bakery even opened. She answered half awake and I said, "I think they're watching my house." She went silent. Then she said, "Okay, don't do anything dumb. Tell the investigator. I already am, I said, and I'm not scared. I'm mad. When a different 9, because fear is what cheaters count on. Fear keeps you quiet. Fear keeps you polite. Fear keeps you making casseroles for people who are stabbing you in the back. I wasn't making casseroles. I texted the investigator and told him about the car. He replied fast. Could be nothing. Could be her. I'll run plates if I can get them. And that was the first twist of the day. He sent a follow-up 10 minutes later. They're getting sloppy. I got audio. Audio. That word landed different than photos. Photos prove the affair. Audio proves intent. I locked my office door at the bakery and called him back. He didn't waste time with small talk. He said, they talked in his SUV outside the hotel this morning. Windows cracked. I was close enough. My mouth went dry. You recorded it? Clean, he said. I'm sending the file. My phone buzzed, and there it was. A little audio attachment with a timestamp and the location tagged. I stared at it for a second, thumb hovering, because I knew once I hit play, I'd hear things I couldn't unhear. Then I hit play anyway. At first it was muffled, engine hum, distant traffic. Then their voices cut through, clearer, like the universe wanted me to hear every word. My husband said, low and irritated. She's clueless. She'll sign whatever I put in front of her. And my daughter-in-law laughed. Not nervous, not guilty, amused. She said, good, because I'm not doing this forever. I want the stores. The chain. I want my name on it. A stores. Chain. My bakery wasn't just one shop. I'd built it up over years. One location at a time, the hard way. Early mornings, burnt batches, payroll stress, smiling at customers when I wanted to crawl under the counter. And here they were, talking about it like it was a purse they could borrow. My husband said, we'll do the paperwork. Not here. Not at the house. We'll go through a notary. County clerk stuff. Make it official. End quote. Then she said the line that made my vision go narrow. She called me an old hag. Just like that. Like I was some obstacle. Some expired thing in their way. I paused the audio and stared at my desk. The hum of the refrigerator in the back room sounded too loud. My own breathing sounded too loud. You don't come back from that. I played the rest. She said, and your son won't do anything. He's a good boy. He'll blame himself. He always does. My son. My kid. The one they kissed on the forehead at family dinner. My husband said, he'll be fine. He's at work half the time anyway. We just keep her quiet until everything's done. Keep her quiet. That's what I was to them. A problem to manage. I stopped the audio and saved it 3 ways. Phone, laptop, and a little flash drive I kept in my purse, like a paranoid teenager hiding secrets from her parents. Maybe I'm petty, but I'm petty with receipts. Then I sat there and did something that surprised even me. I laughed, not because it was funny, because it was ridiculous. The audacity, the entitlement, the way they spoke, like the world owed them my life's work. And if you're thinking, how do you not just drive home and start throwing plates? Look, you can do that if you want, but I needed them to keep talking. I needed them to keep believing I was the easy mark. So I called an attorney. I didn't call some fancy billboard lawyer. I called a local family attorney. Linda recommended a woman who sounded like she'd eaten 1,000 liars for breakfast. Her receptionist got me in for a quick consult that afternoon. I walked into that office in a strip mall near a Starbucks, sat in a leather chair that squeaked when I shifted, and I laid out the basics without turning it into a soap opera. Affair. Proof. Business theft talk. Notary. County clerk. The attorney listened. Chin tilted. Eyes sharp. When I played the audio clip, she didn't gasp. She didn't flinch. She just nodded like, yep, there it is. She said, do you have your business documents secured? I said, my files are in my office at the bakery, some copies at home. She leaned forward. Today, you lock them down. Passwords, accounts, access. And don't sign anything he puts in front of you. Not a napkin, not a sticky note, nothing. End quote. Then she said something that hit hard. If he's planning to move assets, he may already have paperwork drafted. That's when my stomach tightened again, because my husband had been oddly helpful lately, asking random questions about the bakery. What's the LLC called again? Who's on the lease? Do we still use that same bank? Stuff I brushed off as curiosity. It wasn't curiosity. It was inventory. I left the attorney's office with a plan and a promise. If they made a legal move, I'd be ready to slap it down. And here's your first little satisfaction moment, because I needed one. I drove straight back to the bakery, went into my office, and changed every password I could think of. Bank, payroll, vendor accounts, email, security cameras, anything tied to the business. Then I called my bank and told them to add an extra layer of verification because I'm concerned about unauthorized transactions. The woman on the phone said, "Ma'am, we can definitely set up a verbal passcode." I picked one on the spot, and I smiled when I said it, because the passcode was something my husband would never guess. He thought he knew me. He didn't. By late afternoon, my husband called me. He never calls during work unless he wants something. He said, casual, "Hey, you got a minute?" I kept my voice steady. "Sure. What's up?" He said, "I've got some paperwork I need you to look at. It's complicated, and you're better with details." Complicated. Better with details. He was buttering me up like I was a dinner roll. I said, "What kind of paperwork?" He hesitated for a beat, then said, "Just some business stuff. Taxes, ownership. You know, taxes, ownership. You know, you ever hear somebody lying and they keep it vague on purpose? That, right there." I said, "Bring it by. I'll take a look tonight." He sounded relieved. "Perfect. Thanks, babe." Babe. He hadn't called me babe in months. Big mistake. He came home that evening with a thick envelope and a grin like he'd already won. He set it on the kitchen table and tapped it twice, like it was a gift. He said, "I just need your eyes on it." I didn't touch it right away. I poured myself a glass of iced tea, sat down, and looked at the top page. It had official-looking formatting, tidy headings, signature lines, and the kind of language people skim because it makes your eyes cross. He was counting on me skimming. I read every word, and there it was, buried in the middle like a landmine. A transfer clause. A member interest assignment. A line that shifted control of my bakery company upon signature to him. Not half, not shared. Control. My chest got tight, but my face stayed calm. I flipped another page, slowly, like I was just being thorough. More legalese, more signature spaces. A notary block at the bottom of the final page. He wasn't planning to talk about this. He was planning to slide it under my pen. I looked up at him and said, "Real sweet. Where'd you get this?" He shrugged. "A guy I know. He helps with business structuring." A guy. No name. No firm. No nothing. I nodded like that made sense. Okay. "And why are we doing this?" He leaned back in his chair like he was explaining the weather. "Just protecting the business. In case something happens to you. You know how life is. Protecting the business." "From me?" I said, "Okay. I want to sleep on it." His smile twitched. "Sleep on it? It's not a big deal." I took a sip of tea. If it's not a big deal, it can wait. He stared at me for a second too long, like he was recalculating. Then he forced a laugh. "You're overthinking." Eye hopes. And there was the second twist. His phone lit up on the counter right then, face up, and a missed call flashed across the screen. It was her name, my daughter-in-law, clear as day. He snatched the phone so fast he almost knocked over my tea. He said, "Too quick. Work. It's work." I leaned forward and said, "Quiet. Since when is your work calling you at 8:47 at night?" He blinked. His throat bobbed. Then he went for anger, because that's what guilty people do when they're cornered. He said, "Why are you interrogating me?" I set the papers down, perfectly aligned, and said, "I'm not. I'm reading." He stared at me like he wanted to crush me with his eyes. Then he grabbed the envelope and said, "Fine, forget it. I'll handle it." He walked off with the papers like a kid storming out of a room, and I sat there at the table with my heart thudding and my hands steady, because that was my first strike. Not signing, not reacting, not giving him a single inch. He thought he'd come home and rob me with a pen. Not today. After he went to bed, I waited. I stayed up watching TV, volume low, acting normal. The second I heard him snoring, I moved. I went to his SUV with my phone, flashlight, and opened the passenger side door. I didn't rummage like a thief. I searched like a woman trying to save her life. In the center console, under some receipts, I found a folder. Inside were printed drafts, versions of the same document, with slightly different wording, like someone had been tweaking it. There was also a sticky note with a notary name and a phone number. And on another page, this one made me cold, there were notes in the margins. Have her sign where highlighted. Don't mention transfer clause. Schedule notary Monday. I took photos of everything. Every page, every margin note, every sticky note. Then I put it back exactly the way I found it. You want to see a woman's patience? Watch what she does with proof. The next morning, I did something that felt almost unreal. I planned a trip, not a real vacation, not a romantic getaway, a decoy, a baited hook. I texted my husband while he was at work. Hey, Linda's sister in Austin is having a thing this weekend. I might drive down with Linda for a couple days. You'll be okay here? He replied in under a minute. Sure. Have fun. Be safe. No questions. No why. No, I'll miss you. That's going. Just relief. Dressed up as support. That told me everything. Then I texted my son, separate. Thinking about running to Austin with Linda for the weekend. You working? He replied, on call, but I can swing by if you need anything. My sweet boy. Always showing up, and that's when I decided I had to protect him too, because he was about to get hit by a truck he didn't see coming. Here's the thing. And you can judge me if you want. I didn't tell him yet. Not because I didn't trust him. Because I trusted him too much. My son is the kind of man who would confront his father the second he had a whiff of betrayal. And that would blow my whole plan. And at that point, I wasn't just trying to expose an affair. I was trying to stop a theft. Would you have held that secret in your chest, knowing what it would do to him? Because that was the weight I carried while I smiled and baked and pretended. That afternoon, I met the investigator again. This time in the parking lot behind a Target, because that felt poetic in a messed up way. Regular people pushing carts, loading groceries, living their lives. And me, in my car, receiving a folder of my own reality. He handed me a flash drive. Audio's on there. Photos, too. Plus what you told me about the paperwork. I said, they're planning a notary. He nodded. That's what the audio sounded like. If they go through a notary and county records, it's a paper trail. Good, I said. Paper trails work both ways. He looked at me for a second like he was deciding whether to ask a question. Then he said, you're not falling apart. I said, I don't have time. And that was true. If I fell apart, they'd win. If I stayed focused, I could take control. So I went home and set the next move. I planted a recorder, not in some dramatic spy way with wires and gadgets all over my house. Simple, small, the kind people use to record meetings. Linda's attorney friend had told, toggle me to be careful. But in Texas, recording can be legal depending on consent rules. And I wasn't playing courtroom games yet. I was collecting truth. I picked the bedroom because that's where my husband's guard dropped. That's where he talked freely when he thought he was safe. I tucked the recorder behind a framed wedding photo on my dresser. The irony tasted bitter. Our smiling faces hiding the thing that would expose him. Then I did one more thing. I moved a few small, harmless items in the room, just enough that I'd know if someone was snooping. A perfume bottle angled a certain way. A book slightly pulled out. A drawer not fully closed, tiny alarms. Because I didn't trust my house anymore. That night, my husband came home acting cheerful again. Too cheerful. He asked about my Austin trip, and I watched his eyes when he thought I wasn't watching. He was excited. He said, "So you're leaving Friday morning?" "Probably," I said. He nodded fast. "Okay, cool." Then he tried to pull me close, like he was suddenly affectionate. His hands on my shoulders, his voice soft. "You've been stressed. You deserve a break." I stepped back and said, "I've got flour in my hair." He laughed like it was cute, but his eyes were irritated. He didn't like being denied. He wanted me pliable. I wasn't pliable. Later, while he was in the shower, his phone buzzed on the bathroom counter. I didn't grab it. I didn't need to. The screen lit up and showed a preview. A text from her. Friday. Same plan? Same plan. My throat tightened, but my hand stayed steady as I walked out of the bathroom and went to the kitchen like I was just cleaning up. When he came out, towel around his waist, he grabbed his phone and angled it away from me, out of habit. He didn't even realize he was doing it. He said, "Everything okay?" I smiled without warmth. "Yep." Then the first real counterattack came faster than I expected. The next day, while I was at the bakery, the county clerk's office called my business line. My employee transferred it to my office, confused. "They said it's about an LLC filing?" I felt my pulse spike, but I kept my voice calm. "Send it through." A woman's voice came on, professional and polite. "Ma'am, we received a request for information regarding an ownership filing for Roberts." She said the name of my bakery company, and it made me grip my pen. I said, "Who requested it?" She hesitated, because they don't always volunteer that, but she said, "A notary reached out asking about the filing procedure. I can give you the notary name if you'd like." I swallowed. "Yes." She gave it to me, and it matched the sticky note I'd photographed from my husband's car. So they weren't just talking. They were moving. They had already started pulling the lever. That was it. This wasn't a messy affair anymore. This was an attempted takeover. I thanked the clerk, hung up, and immediately called my attorney. I told her, "They're trying to file something. I have drafts. I have audio." She said, "Do not let them get anything notarized. I want those drafts, and I want a copy of that audio today." So I printed everything. Every photo. Every margin note. Every screenshot. I made 2 binders, one for her, one for me. I put the flash drive in a labeled envelope, and then I did my second strike. I called the notary myself. When she answered, I kept my tone sweet. "Hi, I heard you might be helping with some business documents for my family. I wanted to make sure everything's correct." She sounded cautious right away. "Ma'am, I can't discuss clients." "I understand," I said. "I'm one of the members of the LLC. I'm asking because I'm concerned about fraud." Silence. Then she said, slower, "If you believe documents are being presented without your consent, you should contact law enforcement." I said, "I will. I just want you to know if my husband or anyone else shows up with documents claiming to be mine, they are not." Another pause. Then she said, "Thank you for telling me that." Click. That was me cutting the fuse. And I didn't even have to raise my voice. That evening, my husband came home tense. Not whistling, not cheerful, tight jaw, quick steps. He asked, "Did you call anyone today?" I looked up from chopping onions like this was the most casual question in the world. "Why?" He shrugged too hard. "Just wondering." I said, "I talked to a vendor. Why?" He stared at me like he wanted to peel the truth off my face. Then he forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. No reason. Liars hate resistance. He was feeling it. Later, I went to bed early again because I needed the recorder to catch what he did when he thought I was alone in the dark. I left the bedroom door cracked and listened. I heard him on the phone in the hallway. Voice low, urgent. He said, "Something's off. She's acting weird." Then he said the words that made my blood run cold. She might know. My daughter-in-law's voice came through faintly, tinny from the phone. I couldn't make out everything, but I heard enough. She said, sharp and annoyed. Then we move faster. Move faster. That's what they decided when they felt pressure. Go faster, get it done, lock it in. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, and I realized my decoy trip wasn't just bait anymore. It was a deadline. If I left town Friday like I'd told them, they'd bring her into my house. They'd use my bed like a motel. And they'd do it with the confidence of people who thought they were about to steal my business too. So I adjusted the plan. I was going to leave, but I wasn't going anywhere. The next day, I packed a weekend bag in plain sight. I made a show of it. I even talked about it on the phone with Linda where my husband could overhear. Yeah, I said loud enough. We'll leave early Friday. Beat traffic. My husband walked through the hallway while I said it, and his shoulders relaxed like a man who thought he'd just been handed freedom. He didn't know freedom was a trap. Friday morning came fast. I loaded my bag into my car. I kissed my husband on the cheek like a dutiful wife. He tried to hug me, too tight, and I stepped away, smiling. Have fun, he said, voice light. I nodded. Oh, I will. Then I drove to the end of the street, turned the corner, and parked behind Linda's house. Linda opened her door in a robe and said, You sure about this? I said, No, but I'm doing it anyway. Because at some point, you stop asking if you're sure. You start asking if you're ready. We sat in her living room with the blinds tilted just enough to see outside. My phone was set up with the recorder's feed notifications. The investigator was on standby because I wasn't doing this alone anymore. Hours passed, slow and thick. Around midday, my husband texted me. Made it okay? I replied, Yep. Just stopped for gas. Lie. But it was for a reason. Then, a little after midnight, my phone buzzed with the alert from the recorder. Sound detected. I held my breath and tapped into the live audio. At first, it was just footsteps and the soft thud of a door closing. Then my husband's voice, low and excited. She's gone. Then a second voice, too familiar now, said, Finally, my daughter-in-law, inside my house, inside my bedroom. And the last thing I heard before the audio cut for a second was my husband saying, laughing like this was some joke, Hurry up, we don't have all night. It's not it. I set my phone down on Linda's coffee table and looked her dead in the eye. Because now it was time to spring the trap. And right then, my front door camera sent a notification too. Motion detected. Multiple people. They weren't alone. Lights out. One more thing for you. Don't blink. The second my door camera pinged, multiple people, I knew they weren't just sneaking around. And you'd have done the same thing I did. You would have moved. Game's over. I grabbed my keys off Linda's coffee table and stood up so fast my knees popped. Linda's eyes went wide, and she whispered, Are you calling the cops? Not yet, I said. I'm calling witnesses. Because here's what cheaters do when they get caught. They lie louder. They cry. They twist it. They make you look crazy. And suddenly, you're the problem. I wasn't giving them that chance. My phone buzzed again, this time from my front door camera app. The little thumbnail showed movement on my porch, shadows passing close to the lens. It wasn't just my husband and my daughter-in-law anymore. There were extra bodies. I tapped into the live view, and my stomach tightened hard. 2 men I didn't recognize were standing by my front steps. One of them had his hands in his hoodie pocket like he owned the place. My husband opened the door from the inside, glanced around, and waved them in like they were friends. So they brought backup. That's when I understood the counterattack. It wasn't just affair and paperwork. They were building a little team, a little circle of people who would say whatever needed to be said. That's how you steal a life. Linda grabbed her phone. Do you want me to call? Call the investigator, I said, and stay on the line. Then I called my son. He picked up on the second ring, voice sleepy and confused. Mom? I kept my voice steady, but I didn't sugarcoat it. I need you at my house right now. He sat up. I could hear it. What's going on? I'll explain when you're here, I said. Just come, please. There was a beat. Then he said, I'm on my way. That was my first real gamble, because calling him meant the whole thing could explode in seconds. But it also meant I'd have the one witness that mattered most, and I wasn't going to let him stay the last one to know. Linda and I drove back toward my neighborhood with the lights off inside the car and the radio dead silent. The streets were mostly empty, the kind of late-night calm that makes every red light feel personal. I kept glancing at my phone, watching the camera thumbnails update like a horror movie flipbook. Front door, closed, living room lights, on. Then, a ping from my bedroom camera. Motion. They were in there. I didn't go straight to my house. That would have been the dramatic thing. The dumb thing. The get yourself called unstable thing. Instead, I pulled into my neighbor's driveway 2 houses down. Her porch light was off, but I knew she was awake. She's one of those women who notices everything. The kind who can tell you who got a new fence and who's fighting just by the way the trash cans are lined up. I knocked fast. She cracked the door and squinted. You okay? I said. No, and I need your help. Her eyes sharpened. Do you want me to call 911? Not yet, I said again. I need you to look out your upstairs window. I need you to be a witness to who's coming in and out of my house tonight. She didn't hesitate. She just opened the door wider and said, Come on. That's the thing about decent people. When they realize something's wrong, they don't ask for the whole story first. They step in. We went upstairs, and she pulled the blinds back just enough to see the street without putting ourselves in the window like targets. From there, we had a clear line to my driveway and my front porch. And sure enough, there were 2 unfamiliar cars now. One parked half on the curb, careless. The other tucked behind my husband's SUV like it belonged. Linda whispered, Those aren't yours. Nope, I said, and they're not welcome. My neighbor's jaw tightened. Who are they? Friends of my husband, I said, and even saying that out loud made my skin crawl. Then my phone buzzed again, and the investigator's name popped up. Linda answered on speaker, voice low. He said, You seeing this? Yep, I said. 2 unknown men. They went inside. He said, That's not good. No, I said, it's useful, because now I had a bigger story than they cheated. Now they brought people into my home while I was out of town. And that plays real different when you say it to a judge, a cop, or even just your family. My neighbor leaned closer to the glass. Someone's at the back gate. I followed her gaze, and sure enough, a figure moved along the side of my yard like they were trying not to trip the motion lights. That made my mouth go dry. They weren't just inside my bedroom. They were moving around my property like they were scouting it. So I made the call. I called 911. And before anybody gets cute about it, I didn't lie and say someone had a gun. I didn't fake some violent crime. I didn't make up a story that could get someone hurt. I told the truth in the simplest, most urgent way possible. I said, I'm out of town, and my security cameras show multiple people inside my house. I don't recognize some of them. I'm worried about a break-in. The dispatcher's tone shifted immediately. Ma'am, are you safe right now? Yes, I said. But I need an officer to check my house. She asked for my address, the description of the vehicles, and whether I knew if anyone inside had permission to be there. I swallowed and said, My husband lives there, but those other men do not. Because that's the messy part, isn't it? When your own spouse becomes the maybe in a 911 call. The dispatcher said, Units are on the way. And I felt that tight, cold clarity settle in. Let it happen in the light. We waited upstairs, breathing shallow, watching my front porch like it was a stage. A minute later, my door camera sent a little notification. My husband opened the door and stepped out, phone pressed to his ear. He looked around like a man checking for cops. Then he paced down the porch steps, walked to one of the unfamiliar cars, and leaned in the window to talk to the driver. My neighbor muttered, "That's sneaky." Linda whispered, "He's nervous." "Good." I watched my husband point toward the side of the house, then gesture like, "Stay put." The driver nodded. Whatever their plan was, they were coordinating it. And if you're wondering why my hands weren't shaking, it's because my body had already burned through panic. There was nothing left but focus. 2 minutes later, I heard distant sirens. My neighbor's eyes widened. "They're coming." And that's when my husband's head snapped toward the street like he felt it before he heard it. He darted back inside. The front door slammed. The porch light flicked off. He was trying to disappear. Nice try. 2 Dallas police cars rolled into the neighborhood with lights on but sirens off. That controlled kind of arrival. They parked near my driveway, and 2 officers stepped out, flashlights sweeping. One of them walked up my driveway and knocked. Hard. Nobody answered. Then he knocked again, louder, flashlight beam cutting across my front window. Still nothing. From the upstairs window, I watched my living room blinds twitch. Someone inside was watching them back. The officer spoke into his radio, then walked around the side of the house. A second later, my phone buzzed with a new alert. Backyard motion detected. My husband had someone moving around back. I could feel my pulse in my throat. Linda whispered, "Are you sure this is smart?" I looked at her. "No, but I'm done being careful for them. I have new." Then my son's headlights turned into the neighborhood like a lifeline. He parked fast and got out, still wearing the same hoodie he sleeps in, hair messy, face drawn tight with worry. He looked up at my neighbor's house like he was trying to spot me. I cracked the front door downstairs and waved him in quick. He came inside, breathless. "Mom, what is happening?" I grabbed his arm and said, low and urgent, "Get upstairs. Don't go outside. Don't talk to your dad yet." His face tightened. "Why are the cops?" "Because something's going on at my house," I said. "And you're going to see it, but you need to stay calm." He stared at me like I'd grown a second head, but he followed me up the stairs anyway, because he trusts me. That trust broke my heart and held me up at the same time. From the window, my son watched his father's driveway fill with flashlights and uniforms. You could see it on his face, the confusion, the disbelief, the way his brain kept trying to form a normal explanation. Then his dad opened the front door. My husband stepped out with both hands up, like he was the innocent one, like he'd just been interrupted while watching TV. He said something to the officers we couldn't hear, but his posture was pure performance. Calm, cooperative, harmless. My son whispered, "What the hell?" I didn't answer, because the next moment answered for me. One of the officers shined his flashlight past my husband into the house, and the beam caught movement in the hallway. A woman's silhouette. Then she stepped into the light, and my son's body went rigid. His wife, standing in my doorway at 1 a.m, hair down, barefoot, wearing one of my robes, the kind I keep hanging on the back of my bathroom door. My son's mouth fell open like he couldn't get air. He made a sound that wasn't even a word, and there it was. The betrayal, in full color, under police flashlights. My neighbor gasped and covered her mouth. Linda went still as stone. I didn't look at anybody else. I watched my son. Because the worst part of this wasn't my husband cheating. It was my son watching the truth take a bite out of him. He stumbled backward a step, hand on the windowsill like he needed support. His eyes didn't leave his wife's face. She looked down, then back up, then tried to step behind my husband like he could shield her from reality. He couldn't. Outside, one of the unfamiliar men stepped onto my porch, trying to act casual, and the officer immediately put a hand out, stopping him. Another officer turned and asked for IDs. That's when the whole thing started to wobble for them. Because now, it wasn't just 2 cheaters. It was a house full of people with no good explanation. The officers talked to my husband for a minute, then one of them went inside. The flashlight beam swept across the living room, then down the hallway. The officer came back out and said something to my husband that made him stiffen. Then the officer pointed toward the house, firm, and my husband's face tightened with anger. He was losing control, and men like that hate losing control. My son turned to me slowly, eyes wet but hard. Mom, why is she there? I put my hand on his shoulder. Because your dad's been lying to you. He flinched like I'd slapped him. He said, no, that's not. I said, I have proof. His jaw clenched so tight I thought he might crack a tooth. He stared out the window again, and I watched his chest rise and fall like he was fighting the urge to run out there and swing. So I grabbed his wrist firm. Not yet. He looked at me, and there was this raw panic. Mom, tell me you're wrong. I shook my head. I'm not. And that's when my husband spotted my son's car. He turned his head, saw it parked down the street, and his eyes flashed with something ugly. Not shame, rage. He shouted something toward the neighborhood, and even from upstairs, I could tell he was trying to spin it, trying to control the story. My neighbor muttered, He's putting on a show. Yeah, then my husband did the thing I didn't expect. He pointed up toward my neighbor's house, toward the window we were in. He'd realized where we were watching from, and he yelled, loud enough that the whole street could hear, She's setting me up, she's crazy. My son jerked like he'd been hit again. His face twisted, and he shook his head like he couldn't process his dad calling his mom crazy in front of police. And I'll be honest with you, that accusation still lights me up, because it's such a classic move. When they get caught, they don't apologize, they accuse. They label you unstable, so nobody believes you. So, I made my next move fast. I walked downstairs, grabbed my purse, pulled out my phone, and went right out the front door of my neighbor's house. Linda grabbed my arm. Wait, I looked at her. No, he's not doing this. My son followed me, eyes wild. Mom, don't. I turned and said, Lo, you stay here and watch. You need to see your father's face when he can't lie anymore. That line hurt to say, but it was true. I walked straight toward my driveway like I belonged there, because I did. It's my house, my life, my work, my everything. The police officer met me halfway, hand raised slightly like, Ma'am, stop. I held up my phone and said, I'm the homeowner. I have security footage, and I have reason to believe there are people in my home who don't have permission. The officer's gaze flicked past me to my husband, then back to me. Ma'am, is that your husband? Yes, I said. And that woman is my son's wife. The officer's eyebrows jumped just a fraction, like he'd heard a lot of things on this job, but that one still hit. He said, Okay, we're going to separate everyone and figure out what's going on. My husband cut in, voice sharp. This is ridiculous. She's been acting paranoid for weeks. I turned to him and said, calm as ice. Stop talking about me like I'm not standing here. He blinked, surprised, like he wasn't used to me pushing back in public. Good. One of the officers asked my husband, Sir, whose vehicles are these? My husband hesitated. One of the unknown men stepped forward and said, We're just friends, man. We came to hang out. At 1 a.m? The officer said, deadpan. The guy shrugged. We were watching the game. The officer didn't even argue. He just stared at him until the guy looked away. Then the officer asked my daughter-in-law, Ma'am, do you live here? She glanced at my husband, then said, No. It's quite. So why are you inside? The officer asked. And she did the thing guilty people do when they're cornered. She lied badly. She said, I was, checking on the house, because she's out of town. I laughed once, short and humorless. In my robe, in my bedroom, her cheeks flushed bright red. My husband snapped, Don't talk to her like that. I turned to him. I'll talk to whoever's wearing my clothes however I want. One of the officers held up a hand. Ma'am, let's keep it calm. End quote. I nodded. I am calm. I brought receipts. Then I pulled up the clip from my bedroom recorder, the one that caught my husband saying, She's gone, and her voice answering, Finally. I didn't blast it like a speakerphone spectacle. I held it out to the officer and said, "This is from inside my home tonight. I'm giving it to you because I want documentation." The officer listened for 3 seconds, and his face tightened. He looked at my husband, then at my daughter-in-law. And that's when my husband's expression changed. Not guilt, panic, because he realized I wasn't just upset. I was prepared. The officer said, "Sir, I need you to step aside." My husband's jaw clenched. He tried to argue, but the officer's tone didn't budge. "Step aside." So my husband stepped aside, and I saw my daughter-in-law's hands start to shake. She kept swallowing like she was trying to force the lie back down. My son walked up at that moment, coming down the street like a man walking into his own nightmare. He stopped when he saw his wife on my porch, and for 1 second he just stared at her like she was someone he'd never met. She whispered his name, trying to sound soft. "Baby." He cut her off. "Don't." One word, and she flinched. My husband stepped forward, eyes on my son, voice suddenly pleading. "Son, listen, your mom's—" My son turned on him so fast, it was scary. "You don't get to talk right now." My husband froze. He wasn't used to that. And there it was, my near-defeat moment. Because for a split second, I thought my son was going to collapse. I saw his shoulders dip, his face go blank, like his brain was trying to shut off the pain. He looked at me, and his voice cracked. "Mom, is this real?" I nodded once. "Yeah." He pressed his lips together hard, eyes wet, and he looked back at his wife. And that's when she tried her own counterattack. She lifted her chin and said, loud enough for the officers, "This is her fault. She drove him away. She's cold. She's controlling. I stepped forward and said, "You are standing in my house at 1 a.m. The officers didn't even let her finish. One of them said, "Ma'am, stop talking." She shut her mouth, but her eyes were mean, angry, because she'd gotten comfortable disrespecting me in private, and now she had to do it under lights. Then the next twist hit, sharp. One of the officers came out from inside my house holding a small folder. "Ma'am," he said, looking at me, "we found documents on the kitchen table. Business transfer paperwork." My husband's face drained. The officer flipped it open and read the first page like he actually understood it. "This appears to be an assignment of ownership interest." That officer didn't know me. He didn't care about family drama. He cared about facts. And the fact was, my husband had papers ready to strip my business out from under me. My son heard that and turned to his father, eyes wide with a different kind of shock. "You were going to steal Mom's bakery?" My husband sputtered. "No, it's not. That's not what it is." My son barked a laugh that sounded like pain. "Then what is it?" My husband couldn't answer, because there is no sweet way to explain stealing from your wife and your son at the same time. Here's the ugly part. My husband tried to lunge back into the house. Not at me, at the paperwork. He wanted to grab it, hide it, tear it up, whatever. The officer stepped in front of him fast and said, "Sir, don't." My husband stopped, but his hands balled into fists like he wanted to punch a wall. And that's when the night escalated into something I didn't plan. From inside the house, the smoke alarm started screaming. Not a soft beep. Full siren. One officer turned and said, "Is there smoke?" Another officer pushed past him into the entryway, flashlight sweeping. My husband's eyes widened, and for half a second, he looked caught, like he knew exactly why it was going off. He wasn't just sneaking around. He was messing with my house. The officer shouted, "Is anyone cooking? Is there a fire?" My husband snapped, "No, it's nothing." But the alarm kept screaming. And then I smelled it, faint at first, then stronger, burnt. Like somebody had tried to create a distraction. Linda whispered behind me, "Oh my God." The officer didn't debate it. He did what officers do when the alarm is screaming and the homeowner is saying there are unknown people inside. He called for the fire department. And when the fire department got dispatched, everything changed. Because firefighters don't care who's cheating. They don't care who's lying. They care about safety, and they move with authority. Within minutes, a fire truck rolled up, lights flashing red across my street like a warning. Neighbors started peeking out. Porch lights popped on one by one. Phones came out. People started whispering. Public. Bright. Unavoidable. 2 firefighters walked up in full gear, faces serious. One of them asked, "Who's the homeowner?" I raised my hand. Me. He said, "Where's the smoke?" The officer pointed toward the kitchen area. "We're checking now." The firefighters moved fast. They went inside, and the sound of their boots on my hardwood floor made my throat tighten. That floor was where my son learned to walk. Now it was a crime scene. One firefighter called out from inside, "We've got smoke in the kitchen area. Looks like something burned on the stove." Burned on the stove? My husband's eyes flicked away, and I knew right then. He'd tried to create chaos so he could destroy the evidence or hustle people out. He'd tried to turn my own home into noise. And it didn't work. The firefighter said, "We need to clear the house. Everyone out." My husband protested. "This is ridiculous." The firefighter didn't even look at him. He just repeated louder, "Everyone out. Now." So they all came out, my husband, my daughter-in-law, the 2 unknown men, and the officers guiding them like cattle. The street was full of lights and faces now. Neighbors gathered in pajamas. Somebody across the way was filming. Somebody else was whispering, "Is that her husband?" Like they'd just gotten the juiciest gossip of their lives. I didn't love that part, but I wasn't going to protect them from consequences. They didn't protect me. My son stood on the edge of the driveway, hands shaking, eyes locked on his wife. She tried to step toward him, tears starting now, because tears are a tool when you've run out of lies. She said, "Please just let me explain." He shook his head, slow. "You were in my mom's bed." End quote. She winced like he'd slapped her, and for a second, I thought she might collapse. Then she did the wildest thing. She turned on me. She pointed at me and snapped, "You set this up." And I said, loud enough for the whole street, "You set yourself up when you climbed into my marriage." Silence. Not total silence. The smoke alarm was still chirping inside, and the fire truck lights were still flashing, but that moment landed. Even the neighbors stopped whispering for a beat. Because nobody likes a homewrecker who tries to play victim. One of the unknown men tried to slip away down the sidewalk, and an officer stopped him. "Sir, you need to stay here until we're done." The guy raised his hands like, whatever, but he stayed. Then my husband leaned in close to my son and said, low and urgent, "We need to talk." Alone. My son pulled back like his dad was radioactive. "You lost alone when you brought her into Mom's house." One present. My husband's face twisted, and he tried to change tactics. He looked at me and said, "This isn't what it looks like." I laughed again, short and sharp. "You don't get to say that tonight." The officer approached me with a notepad. "Ma'am, do you want to press trespass for the people who don't live here?" I nodded. "Yes." My daughter-in-law's eyes went wide. "What?" "No." The officer cut her off. "Ma'am, you do not live here." She looked at my husband like he was supposed to save her. He stared straight ahead, lips pressed thin. He wasn't saving anyone anymore. My son's breathing turned ragged. He wiped his face hard with his sleeve like he was angry at the tears themselves. Then he did something that hit me right in the gut. He looked at his dad and said, "How long?" My husband hesitated. My son repeated louder, "How long have you been doing this with my wife?" My husband's eyes darted, searching for an exit that didn't exist. And my daughter-in-law answered before he did. She said, bitter, "Long enough." That was the moment my son made a sound I'll never forget. Not a sob, not a yell, something in between, like a piece of him snapped. He turned away from both of them and walked toward his car, like he needed to get away, before he broke right there in front of everyone. I moved to follow him, but he held up a hand without looking back. "Mom, I need a minute." So I stopped, because he deserved that minute. And I stood there on my driveway, watching the fire department clear my house, watching officers take names, watching my husband's face harden into that stubborn, defensive mask men wear when they know they're wrong, but refuse to surrender. Near defeat wasn't me falling apart. Near defeat was watching my son walk away from his own family like it was a burning building. Then the turning point came from somewhere I didn't expect. One of the firefighters came back out and walked toward me holding something in a clear plastic evidence bag. He looked at the officer, then at me. He said, "Ma'am, we found this in the bedroom while we were clearing the house." My stomach clenched. "What is it?" He held it up. A small key. Old-fashioned. The kind that goes to a lockbox. And attached to it was a little tag that I recognized immediately. It was from a safe deposit box at our bank. My husband's bank. The one he claimed we didn't use anymore. I stared at that key like it was glowing. Because you don't keep a safe deposit box unless you're hiding something. And my husband's eyes locked onto it too. And for the first time all night, he looked genuinely scared. He snapped, "That's private." The officer's eyebrows lifted. "Sir, we found it during a safety sweep in the homeowner's bedroom." My husband's jaw worked like he wanted to argue and knew he couldn't. The officer turned to me. "Ma'am, do you know what this key is for?" I took a slow breath. Yes. And I didn't know it existed until right now. My husband stared at me like he wanted to erase me, and I stared right back. Because in that moment, I understood something simple. He wasn't just cheating. He'd been preparing. This key wasn't about love. It was about leverage. I didn't even feel tired anymore. The adrenaline washed everything else out. I looked at my son standing by his car, shoulders hunched, and I realized this wasn't just going to be a family fight. This was going to be a legal war. And that key was my way in. I found the weapon. That key wasn't a souvenir. And you can guess what it meant the second you see a grown man panic. Found it. The officers didn't hand it to my husband. They handed it to me because it came out of my bedroom during a safety sweep and my name was on the mortgage. My husband kept saying, "That's private, like privacy is some magic word that erases years of lies." The officer looked at him and said, "Flat, sir, you can explain it later." My son stood by his car with his hoodie pulled tight around his face, breathing like he'd run a mile. His wife kept trying to talk, hands up, tears on demand, and it was the most disgusting performance I've ever seen. Then she saw the key. Her eyes darted to my husband's face, and her whole expression changed. Not confusion, recognition. So yeah, that key wasn't just his secret. It was theirs. The cops finished taking names, IDs, and statements. The two unknown guys got told to leave, but not before the officer made it real clear that the homeowner didn't want them back on the property. My daughter-in-law got warned about trespassing in the same calm tone you'd use on a kid who keeps touching a hot stove. My husband tried to keep control, kept trying to pull the officer aside and whisper like this was a family thing. The officer didn't bite. "Sir, you brought people into a home under active dispute. That's not just family." That's when my husband's face hardened into that stubborn mask again, like he could outstare reality. He couldn't. After the fire department cleared the smoke and shut the stove off, the street started to quiet down. Neighbors drifted back inside, still peeking through blinds like it was a free show. My son didn't move for a long time. Then he turned and walked straight past his father and his wife without a word. Not one. His wife reached out like she wanted to grab his sleeve. He flinched away so fast it was almost violent. He said, "Don't touch me," and she froze. That single line did more damage than any speech. My husband watched him go with this stunned look, like he truly didn't believe consequences applied to him. He still didn't get it. Linda hugged me tight and whispered, "What now?" I looked at my husband and said, low enough that only she could hear, "Now we finish it." The next morning, I didn't go home first. I went to my attorney's office with that safe deposit box key sitting heavy in my purse like a loaded coin. Linda drove because I hadn't slept and I didn't trust my own reflexes. My phone kept buzzing with texts I didn't open. I already knew who they were from. Panic texts, denial texts, blame texts, all trash. At the attorney's office, I slid the key across her desk like it was evidence from a crime drama. She picked it up, looked at the tag, and her eyebrows lifted. She said, "This is at your bank?" "Our bank," I corrected. "Or what he calls his bank." She nodded once. "We're going today. And before we go, I want you to file for an emergency order regarding the business." He was preparing transfer paperwork. We're not waiting. So we didn't wait. She drafted what she needed, had me sign what made sense, and she made it very clear what I should not sign, no matter what my husband promised or threatened. Then she did something I appreciated. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're going to hear a lot of noise. Stay on the facts." That's my language. Facts. Receipts. Paper. We drove straight to the bank on Northwest Highway, the one my husband liked because it felt private. The parking lot was half full, normal weekday energy. People in polos walking in for normal reasons, like the world wasn't falling apart. Inside, the air smelled like carpet cleaner and money. I walked up to the front desk and said, "I need to access a safe deposit box." The banker smiled the corporate smile. "Do you have the key and ID?" I handed over both. Then she asked, "Is the box in your name, ma'am?" Here's the part where the universe flexed. The banker typed for a second, frowned slightly, and said, "It's in Mr. Roberts' name only." Only. Not mine. Not joint. Just him. My attorney stepped in smooth as silk. "Ma'am, we have reason to believe marital assets are being concealed. We will be pursuing discovery, but for now we need to document what's in there." The banker's smile tightened. "I'm sorry, but only the named renter can access it. My husband had set it up, so I couldn't even look." Cute. My attorney didn't argue. She just nodded and said, "That's fine. Please note in your system that we requested access today and were denied due to the account holder name." Then she turned to me and said, "We're going to do this another way." The other way was called leverage. We walked out to the parking lot and my attorney said, "Call him, on speaker. Don't fight. Don't yell. Let him talk." So I did. My husband answered like he'd been waiting by the phone. "Finally, are you done with this nonsense?" I said, calm, "Meet me at the bank, now." He scoffed. "Why?" "Because I have your safe deposit box key," I said, and I let the silence hang. Then he snapped, "You went through my stuff?" I said, "Firefighters found it in my bedroom, so yeah, meet me." He tried to play tough. "I'm not doing that." My attorney leaned in and whispered, "Tell him we're filing." End quote. I said, "If you don't show up, we move forward today. Business, divorce, everything. And the police report will include the attempted transfer paperwork." That did it. His tone changed, quick. "Don't be dramatic." I said, "Be here in 30 minutes. Then I hung up before he could keep talking. Because he loves to talk you into circles. Not today. We waited inside the bank lobby where everyone could see us. Because private is where liars thrive. Public is where they start sweating. He showed up 25 minutes later, jaw clenched, wearing his "I'm the victim" face. He saw my attorney, and his eyes narrowed like he'd just spotted a judge. He tried to ignore her and talk to me. "Can we do this somewhere else?" My attorney said, "No." He blinked, annoyed. "Excuse me?" She smiled politely. "We're doing it here." End quote. My husband looked around the lobby, saw a couple older ladies sitting in chairs waiting to see a banker, saw a mom with a stroller, saw a security guard glancing over. He hated it. Good. The banker brought us to the safe deposit box area after verifying his ID. The little room felt colder than it should have, fluorescent lights making everything look harsh and real. The banker slid the box out and left us in the privacy booth. My husband's hand shook when he put the key in the lock. That was the first real crack. He opened the box, and there it was. A stack of cash bands. Not a little, a lot. Envelopes, documents folded crisp, and a small velvet ring box that made my stomach turn. My husband swallowed hard and said, "This isn't what you think." I didn't even look at him. I looked at the contents like I was reading a bill. My attorney said, "We're documenting everything." She pulled out her phone and started photographing each item with the date and time visible. My husband reached to stop her, and she didn't flinch. "Do not touch me." He froze again. The documents were the real poison. They were printed drafts of business transfer agreements, cleaner than the ones I'd found in his SUV. There were notes about member interest and signing schedule. There was a page with my name typed under a signature line, and next to it, a handwriting note. "Have her sign when she's tired." Tired? That's what he thought I was. Then we found the worst one. A fake letter on a template that looked like my bakery letterhead, authorizing my husband to handle ownership changes due to health issues. Health issues. Like he was setting me up as fragile. Like he was building a story where he's the hero, stepping in. My attorney's face tightened. "This is fraud." My husband snapped, "It's a draft." She said, "A draft you hid in a safe deposit box." He opened his mouth, then shut it again because he didn't have a clean lie. Then the velvet ring box got opened. Inside was a simple band, not my style, and a little card from a jewelry store. The card had her name. My daughter-in-law? My husband had bought her a ring. Not just sex. Not just sneaking around. He was building a second life. My attorney photographed that too, and my husband's eyes went glassy with panic. He said, "You're trying to ruin me." I finally looked at him. "You ruined you." And that's when his denial broke into anger. Loud and sharp. "You're doing this to punish me." I said, "I'm doing this to stop you." Because it wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was attempted theft, attempted reputation, destruction, and God knows what else. He stared at the cash like it was going to rescue him. "That money is mine," my attorney said. "It's marital until proven otherwise." He clenched his jaw so tight I could see the muscle jumping. And then he said the dumbest thing of his whole life. He said, "If you don't back off, I'll tell everyone you're unstable." My attorney didn't even blink. "You can tell them whatever you want. We have evidence." Receipts beat rumors. We walked out of that bank with photos, timestamps, and a legal plan. The banker looked uncomfortable, like she wanted to pretend none of it happened. My husband followed us into the parking lot, voice rising, "This is insane. You're insane." End quote. I turned and said, "Calm. You don't get to call me crazy after you hid a fraud packet in a safe." He stopped, breathing hard, eyes darting around because people were watching. A couple folks in the parking lot had slowed down like they were pretending to look for their car but really listening. My husband lowered his voice. "Fine. What do you want?" I said, "Out of my house. Off my accounts. Away from my business." He laughed like he was above it. "You can't kick me out. And it's severed." My attorney stepped forward. "We can. And we will." That afternoon, we filed emergency orders for business control, a restraining order request tied to the forced entry attempt and the people brought into the home. And divorce? My husband got served 2 days later at his job, right there in the lobby. He called me furious, and I let it go to voicemail. His voicemail said, "You're going to regret this." I saved it. Threats are receipts too. Now, here's where the story hits the part that still makes my chest tighten. Because the legal stuff is one thing. My son was the real casualty. He didn't show up to work for 2 days. He didn't answer texts. He didn't eat. He stayed at a friend's place because he couldn't stand being in the same air as his wife. Then, on the 3rd day, Linda called me and said, "Your son's at urgent care." So I drove there like my tires were on fire. He was sitting in a chair in the waiting room, elbows on knees, staring at the floor. He looked 10 years older than he did a week ago. When he saw me, his eyes filled, and he tried to stand like he didn't want to look weak. I sat down next to him anyway and said, "Hey, breathe." He nodded, and his hands shook. "I can't stop thinking about it. I can't shut it off." You know that helpless rage when someone you love is hurting and you can't punch the pain out of them? That. The nurse called him back, and I went with him. He got checked out, got told what anyone in that situation gets told. Stress can hit your body hard. Chest tightness, racing heart, stomach in knots. They kept him for observation in the ER for a bit, just to be safe. And while he lay there in a hospital bed, pale under those fluorescent lights, my phone buzzed with a text from his wife. It said, "Tell him to talk to me." This got out of hand. Out of hand. Like she slipped on a banana peel and landed in my marriage. I showed my son the message. Not to torture him. To stop the gaslighting before it could start. He stared at it, jaw clenched, and he said, "She's not sorry. She's annoyed." "Yep," I said. He swallowed, eyes burning. Did he ever say why?" I kept my voice steady. He said you'd be fine. He said you wouldn't do anything. My son's face twisted, like the betrayal had layers and he was feeling them all at once. Then he looked at me and said, "I want the proof." So I gave it to him. Not every graphic detail, not like some revenge slideshow. Just enough. The restaurant photo, the hotel timestamp, the audio where they talked about stealing the bakery and keeping me quiet. He listened to the audio with his eyes closed. When it ended, he opened his eyes and they were different. Not broken. Sharp. He said, "They thought I was stupid." I didn't answer. I just nodded. Because if I spoke, I might have cried. And he needed me solid. He got discharged later that evening, and we went straight to my attorney's office together. Hospital bracelet still on his wrist. That's how fast he moved once he saw the truth. He met with a divorce attorney of his own because he needed his own lane. And he filed. Not a dramatic confrontation. Not screaming in the driveway. Paperwork, service, cut clean. His wife showed up at my house the next day anyway, like a moth to a flame. She stood at the edge of my driveway in sunglasses like she was the victim in some sad movie. She said, "Can we talk?" I didn't invite her in. I didn't even step off my porch. I said, "There's a restraining order request on the way. Leave." She scoffed, and the mask slipped. "You really think you're the hero here?" I laughed. "I'm not the hero. I'm the homeowner." Then she did her last pathetic move. She tried to guilt me. She said, "He loves me." I looked her up and down and said, "He bought you a ring with hidden cash." Her face drained. She didn't know about the safe deposit box. That was the salt in the wound, because in her fantasy, she was the chosen one, the future, the upgrade. In reality, she was a side project funded by stolen security. She stammered, "That's not." I cut her off. "Get off my property." Inez. She stood there one more second, furious, then turned and stomped to her car, tires spitting gravel as she left. My husband tried a different angle. He sent my son a long text about mistakes and family and forgiveness. My son didn't reply. Then my husband showed up at the bakery like he still had rights there, like he could walk in and charm people into forgetting. He walked through the front door mid-morning, and my employees went stiff because they'd heard whispers from neighbors and seen the police lights the other night. Small towns inside big cities, you know? I stepped out from the back and said, "You're not welcome here." He forced a smile. "This is my business too." I pointed to the counter where a copy of the emergency order was clipped behind the register in a clear sleeve, like a health inspection notice. I said, "Not today." When Priver Tendo's, his eyes flicked to it, and his smile died. He started to argue louder, but the manager on duty, sweet girl, 22, terrified but brave, picked up the phone and said, "Do I need to call the police?" That stopped him, because bullies hate witnesses. He leaned in close to me and hissed, "You're turning everyone against me." I said, quiet, "You did that." Then he walked out with his shoulders hunched, and I watched him go without a flicker of pity. He reaped what he sowed. The legal fallout hit fast after that. The notary backed away the second she heard fraud. The county clerk's office flagged filings tied to the draft documents. The bank took notice once attorneys started sending letters. And my husband's little fantasy of sign her when she's tired turned into court dates, financial disclosures, and a judge who didn't laugh at intimidation. His progression, was almost predictable. First, he denied everything. Then he blamed me. Then he begged. Then he got mean again when begging didn't work. By the time the temporary orders hearing happened, he looked smaller, not physically, spiritually. Like a man who realized the story he wrote in his head wasn't the story that was happening. He tried one last performance in that courthouse hallway, leaning toward my son like he was the injured party. He said, "Son, you're really choosing her over me?" My son stared at him, voice flat. "I'm choosing reality." And that was it. His wife didn't even show up to support him, by the way. She was busy trying to save her own skin. Because once she realized there wasn't a fairy tale ending, she started scrambling. She called my son crying. She called him angry. She called him sweet. He blocked her. Done. A couple weeks later, my son came to the bakery early, before we opened. He stood behind the counter, looked around at the flour-dusted floors and the chalkboard menu, and he said, "I don't want them to take this from you." I swallowed hard. "They won't." He nodded and said, "Tell me what you need." So we rebuilt, not the whole business from scratch, but the feeling of it, the safety, the trust in the routine. We tightened procedures, we changed locks, we upgraded cameras. We made sure only the people who earned access had it. He learned the bookkeeping side, and I watched him turn pain into focus. Not because he was fine, he wasn't, but because working kept him from spiraling. And honestly, it made me proud in the middle of all that mess. My husband tried to come back one more time. Months later, like a dog circling a porch, it got kicked off. He sent a message that said, "I miss the family." No apology, no accountability, just nostalgia like it's a currency. I didn't reply because he didn't miss the family. He missed control. Now, my life is quieter. Not peaceful in a cozy way. Peaceful in a the trash got taken out way. My son is still healing. Some days he looks fine. Some days he looks hollow. But he's standing. And he's honest. And that matters. As for my husband and my daughter-in-law, they didn't get the bakery. They didn't get the money. They didn't get the happy ending. They got paper trails, courtrooms, and a reputation that follows them like a shadow. And me? I kept receipts. If you want more real-life stories where the truth wins, go ahead and subscribe.